let me introduce our special guest today, Mr. Fabio Mauri, Director General of DG MIM. Fabio, welcome to Ostrava, welcome to Melting Pot, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Díky moc. It's a great honor to be at the greatest festival in the country during the Czech presidency of the Council of the European Union, which started a few weeks ago. I thank you very much, the European Commission, for inviting me here. I hope you will not regret it. You're very brave, you should know this. So, I must confess, I had a lot of troubles preparing this presentation because I was like, okay, which kind of audience will I find here this evening? And if you allow me, I will ask you a few questions because it will help me later in the presentation. For example, who of you identifies as Czech or Czechoslovak if you're older? Please raise your hands. Okay, so few, all the rest are international, 50%, 60%. Okay, thank you very much. Who of you went on Erasmus? Or is here now on Erasmus? Oh, few people, okay. Okay, anybody who lived or is living in Brussels right now? 2, 3, okay. I know you then, okay, cool. And who has a background in European politics, European law? Very few people, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, okay, great. Thank you, it will help me a lot. As for me, I'm Fabio Mauri. I was born and raised in Italy, but thanks to the Erasmus program, I discovered how beautiful it is to travel. I lived in different European countries, and back then in 2016, I was living happily in Austria. And I was working as a software developer, that's my background. So I was pro-European, but I had no idea how the European Union works. And then Brexit happened. I was shocked, like we failed in explaining what the European Union is. And I was curious to find out, okay, what are they doing wrong in Brussels? And that's why I quit my job in Austria and I moved to Belgium to discover the EU institutional communication. So I was a trainee at the Department of Communication. Being in the inside of the institution, I discovered easily what were the problems. Why in 2018 I started DG MIM, which is my personal communication project on European matters. DG stands for Directorate General. That's a very long word to say minister. You cannot call them minister in the European Commission, otherwise you give the idea that you are a federation or a government, and some people don't like it, so we call it DG for short. And in 4 years, DG MIM reached about 100,000 followers all over Europe. I was thinking, how can I introduce and explain what it means to live in the European Union, in the capital of the European Union? And I thought the first section of the presentation could be about living in Brussels. Now, Brussels, for many people, is a mystical place somewhere in Central Europe where they impose rules on our own national countries. And if you have this idea in mind, when you move there and you find out that local administration is not as efficient as you might think. So registering in Brussels, it's a very daunting quest, and there is a lot of weird procedures going on in Belgium. And another thing to know about Brussels is that it's always gray, especially in winter, like you don't see the sun for a couple of months, and as an Italian, you really suffer from that. Of course, Belgium has a lot of positive things too. For example, they have Belgian fries, which are the best fries you can find in the world. They have Belgian chocolate, they have Belgian comics, and I know it might be a sensitive topic in the Czech Republic, they also have very good beer there, with more alcohol than yours. So it's a nice town after all, and what I really like of living there is the diversity that you have in Brussels. It's amazing, like you walk on the street and you meet people who are half from Togo, half from China, or half Swedish, half Brazilian, and they all speak 5, 6 languages. It's very beautiful. And as a person who was born and raised in one country, I always feel very poor. I always feel a bit like Ronald Weasley. But when you talk with these people who have a multicultural or even intercultural background, they always tell you, yeah, but at least you know which national team to support at the World Cup. So, you know, you're kind of pure breed. Brussels is also the only city in the world which hosts 7 parliaments. Last time I counted, at least. There are 6 parliaments of the Belgian state, and then there is the European Parliament. So that's a record, probably. To be fair, the European Parliament is actually in Strasbourg, in France. So there are multiple seats. And so the members of the parliaments are forced to go to Strasbourg regularly to hold plenaries there because that's the rule written in the treaties. Of course, there are historical reasons for Strasbourg to be the seat of the European Parliament because it was close to Germany, and after the war, it was an attempt to, reconstruct Europe, bringing the two countries together. And if we love details, there is also a third seat, which is in Luxembourg. That's still the European Parliament is also there. Which now you might tell me it's very confusing, but hey, at least, if you want to storm our European Parliament, you have to be sure that you know where the parliamentarians are. Brussels is also the city where Eurocrats are born. Maybe they start like me, they are students or they are young professionals that move to Brussels as trainees, and then they decide to stay longer. They feel the magic call of the institutions. Of course, as every working place, let's say, it is built in a way that people that are inside have a much better life than those that stay on the outside waiting to enter. And so this is a bit demotivating for young people. It's very hard to enter. The best seats are taken. And this impacts a person's motivation, right? Maybe you start with, I'm gonna save Europe working here, and then you're like, well, maybe I'm gonna change Europe. Then you're like, I just make memes. This brings us to the sorrow of EU communication. Why is it failing? Why we don't manage to explain that it's beautiful to live together? Don't get me wrong. It's not like the EU is not trying to engage the citizens. They put a lot of effort, I swear. Budget, meetings, priorities. We need to inform the citizens. We are so beautiful. We have so many potential. And, they really have to give us their contribution. We are open to listen to their voices and everything. But no, citizens are not impressed. They are not even reached by our propaganda, and they fly away. So you lost them. Doesn't matter how much. Thank you. Another problem of European communication is they like data, they like fact sheets, they have this very dry and institutional way of communicating, and they think, well, we publish a page on our website somewhere and people will read it. And of course, this doesn't happen. Fortunately, there are some chosen people that speak Brussels tongue. And they're supposed to be the European journalists, who are these specific journalists that know everything about the European Union, and they are supposed to bridge its complexity to the member states, to the national states. Unfortunately, they work for media outlets that don't have a lot of interest to explain what the European Union is. There is a much easier narrative, which is always the one that opposes your country with the European Union. So what we hear in the news, it's always, we managed to get so many funds or so much money from the EU, and our president was successful. Nobody explains if net contributors, who are the country that invest more money than they receive in the European Union budget, they managed to develop, the digital market of Estonia, then we all profit of that market, which is a beautiful thing. This European perspective in the news, it's missing, and until we don't have it, it will be very hard for people to be aware that, there is this big bird trying to attract your attentions, because if you don't see it in national news, it's like it doesn't exist. Of course, what I'm saying about, it's nice that we contribute together to the EU budget, it's true only if all the member states use the money wisely. If the money go to some few chosen people who have their own private interest, everybody is damaged. And the same applies to same concept applies to the rules. When you enter the European Union, you have to agree on some basic values, which are like, a government and justice system, they should be separate, because if the government can decide who the judges are. It's not a democracy anymore, it's some kind of autocracy. And this is damaging the whole union, because if you have an autocracy somewhere, the fact that there is a power which is not controlled is bad. And it's bad because the money you then give to that country is wasted and used in a very improper way. So again, money is important and values are important in the European Union. From one side, we have journalists that are forced to present news in a perspective of national states. And from the other side, we have this gigantic echo chamber in which our decision makers are living. In Brussels, nobody can hear you scream. They are enclosed in this golden shrine and they decide and talk about reaching citizens and doing things for democracy. But the feedback from outside doesn't really reach the bubble because, hey, you're used to have your colleagues, they all speak 4 languages, they are all used to travel, they all earn good money. So it's hard to imagine that, that's maybe a 3% of the population that is like this. You have to try to reach out, and that's what the Commission representation in the member states is doing. I think it was started with Juncker Commission, the idea that the Commission itself has to have embassies in the different member states to collect what is the feeling there. So, what can we do? The communication is hard, there is a bubble, we try to break it, but it's not succeeding. My personal idea was like, well, let's use memes and with some humor try to break the news about the European Union. And I imagine it works something like this. This is Ursula von der Leyen, President of the Commission, sharing a meme. This is Margrethe Vestager, I cannot pronounce it properly, Danish Vice President, very cheerful woman. And that's another Vice President, Valdis Dombrovskis, not the most cheerful person. You hear his name and there is this beat. It already gives the mood. It's enough, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so the hope is that when you see something that other people are laughing about, you're like, oh, I also want to laugh. I want to learn why are they laughing. And that's how I hope that memes can help a bit communicating Europe. I will try to persuade you that you can use memes even to talk about the intricacies of the bureaucratic world of the EU. The beginning, that's how our countries were 70 years ago. Everything burned down. Our grandfathers were probably killing each other during Second World War. And we needed to rebuild from there, right? And what is the process? Well, it started with the Council of Europe, 1949, just after the war. Yeah, we need to rebuild. We should do it better. Democracy, defending human rights, all beautiful things. There was a lot of enthusiasm for this project at the beginning, but with time it became a bit put on the side. We needed something more concrete, and there is nothing more concrete than steel and coal. That was the beginning of, let's say, the European Union's idea. It was like, well, let's share some interest and see if we can make a profit out of it. And this worked super well. It worked so well that with the Treaty of Rome, 1957, they were like, okay, maybe we can push it further. We can try to create common areas where we build common laws, for example, agriculture. Let's agree that we share the same rules on how we produce food, and then we can sell food on each other's market, and everybody has a profit because you have more choice and better food. In the 30 years that passed between Treaty of Rome and Maastricht Treaty, there were a lot of improvements on this idea. For example, the Erasmus program, which was founded in 1987, which was like, well, let's also exchange students so we have a more vibrant university. Finally, Maastricht Treaty in 1992, let's try to remove borders, let's try to have a common currency, which was adopted then in 2002. Now, there was also the Lisbon Treaty, which was not so successful. There was an attempt of creating European Constitution. It didn't work, and since then, nothing major happened. But who knows what the future brings? The sky is the limit. We need to care for it. Otherwise, the project will die, and it would be such a pity after so many milestones have been reached. I'm very proud of this meme. It was shared by the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, on the right, in case you were wondering which one was the President. Now, we have common rules, and we have a common currency, more or less. We have no borders in the European Union. How do we continue? How do we make new laws together? That's how it works. You have the European Commission, which is some sort of government, you can imagine something like this, that start a proposal. The Commission has this power of proposing new legislation. They might start a debate because the Parliament asked them to do so, or they might start because sometimes the Council has the power to say to the Commission, please make a proposal on this matter, or there can be some shady committee internal to the Commission that decide, okay, we need to legislate this specific area. And then this proposal walks happily home and expect to be embraced by his family. And it's not always like this. There is the Parliament making amendments to the proposal, the Council, which we will see later, that can also reject a Commission proposal, and then there is a process where they try to find an agreement. Now, you might be surprised that, hey, if a Parliament approves a law, it should become a law, right? No, it's not like this, because there is the Council of the European Union, which is currently under a Czech presidency. The presidency rotates every 6 months. That's an institution created so that the member states can really have power on any legislation that is passed through the parliament. So when you read on the news, Europe forced us to do this, it's not true. There is a lot of power for member states to block any kind of legislation. As you can imagine, when you have two institutions that both can have a say on which laws are approved or not, you have a lot of conflict. Specifically, yes, the Council is always, it's still the prominent institution, I would say, even though with time the Parliament gained more and more power. The Parliament, let's not forget, is the one that you elect when you go voting for European elections. So very important, it's the direct democracy, while the Council is made of ministers of all the member states. Another problem that we have in the Parliament is that sometimes we send there people who are not very interested in the European Union. I'm thinking specifically to right-wing conservative parties. You have these people that are elected there, they go there for 5 years, they just shout all the time, they have no idea what the European Union is. And this is very detrimental, and it's very bad for our democracies, because if you have there 30% of the parliament that does nothing and doesn't want to learn how to create dialogue, how to find agreements, then it's very hard to push any improvement and any new law. In any case, nobody said that democracy is supposed to be simple, right? After all this process, with a lot of agreement and flirting and mediation, finally we have our beautiful European law. Could be worse. It could be like in the past, where the one who was making the rule was the one who had the bigger tanks, and we had war every 10 years. So, all in all, I still think it's a cool project that needs our support. This meme is by Pablito. I would like to thank him. If you listen to the presentation, if you're still awake, you might have heard that I mentioned 3 types of councils. So historically, there is the Council of Europe, which is not a European institution. It was the old one from 1949. And then we have the 2 European institutions, which are the Council of the European Union, or Council of Ministers, and the European Council, which is the meeting of prime ministers and head of states that meet regularly every 3 months in Brussels, and more often if there is a crisis like a war or a pandemic. And council was the word that was trendy back then, I suppose. Knowing about the 3 councils can help you understanding when a journalist is aware of what he's writing and when not. It happens very often that national journalists who have no idea about European politics and yet are writing about it mix up the 2 things. So if you hear that the European Council stopped a legislation, you know that that's not true. It cannot be correct. Now, I don't know if you are more confused or less confused than when we started the presentation, but for sure it's hard to find out which institution has which power and which competency on a certain matter. Sometimes you really feel like this. Of course, it would be beautiful to harmonize, to reduce the size of this machinery, to make it more efficient. That's really how it goes. I mean, the European Union is trying to say, we are slow, we have too many institutions, that the process is complicated. Member states, can you agree on a new treaty which should make everything faster and it would remove useless blockage in this process? But the member states are not very keen in solving European problems because they are busy with their own national problems, understandably. I can hear just the Brussels people laughing. I'm sorry, that's a nerd meme. It's just to say that there are a lot of interesting stories, believe me, to say about the European Union. It's an amazing place to work in, and there are troubles that you'd never imagine because, hey, you're trying to make 500 million people agree on something. It's not easy, and it's very interesting, and it's a lot of fun. And it would be nice to tell you more about the Committee of the Regions, which is supposed to be not the most useful institution that we have. But the time is short, and this meme is by Map Assistant, thanks to him. So the time is short, and that was how I think you can use memes to talk about politics. Yeah, it's not a new idea, honestly. I mean, even the European People's Party is using memes nowadays to make political campaigns. So I don't think it's rocket science what I'm presenting here, and it would be nice to see them used more often by our institutions. Anyway, DG Memes, Minister of Satire and Memes, there is much more than memes. Of course, the main concern for DG Meme is, the budget, as it's absolutely a private communication project. It has no support whatsoever from any institution or political party. But despite of the lack of financial support, DG Meme in 4 years managed to develop a website, YouTube channel, comic panels, and there is a book. There's also a store with a lot of merchandise, to think about the European Union. And who wouldn't want to have a pillow with Ursula von der Leyen on it, or sleeping in a bed with the blanket of Valdis Dombrovskis? These gadgets bring us to the last part of the presentation, which is how you can make your leaders relatable. Of course, the ingredients we have are European leaders who are not people that shout. They are not people that bring, let's go to Wenceslaw Square and protest against something. They are usually very formal, polite people that try to talk things over and find an agreement. So it's hard to make them relatable. You probably don't even know that they exist. Also, if your leader looks like this, it's hard that you feel like a proximity to her. But nevertheless, we have to try to turn her into something more, down to the earth. So, what can we do? Relatable, right? I mean, it's a screenshot a follower sent me. He had to watch the whole parliamentary debate about vaccine contracts, like the most boring thing on earth. And it was the time during the COVID epidemic, so there was a lot of pressure on the president. And this is relatable because you can imagine that this person who we can criticize as much as we want is still taking very important and complicated decisions. It's relatable that sometimes you want to just lash out and say, okay, try to do my job if you can. So, you can play with colors too. I swear I didn't Photoshop the color. Okay, I might have enhanced a bit the light blue, but still, it was really how they were dressed. In big meetings, female leaders understood that if they were differently from the others, people will remember them more. Every 14th of February, DG Meme publishes Europolitan, which is a fictional magazine about the glamour and lifestyle of the European bubble. Commission versus Council. I really like the intense look in this picture. I was checking, okay, Petr Fiala, who is this guy? And then I found this picture, like, oh my God, this is looks like Valdis Dombrovskis. And I found a context to put them together, and I think it worked out quite well. Yeah, so you can make them relatable. You can laugh about it and still, respect them and remember that they exist, which is a great thing. Korzalce. It's schnapps. Okay. Thank you. Good. You will have to clap your hands again because that was the last slide. Thank you so much.
Why, for many people, is the EU so boring and so complicated? Why is it?
Well, because you don't have enough time to follow all its proceedings, right? If you have a normal job, I don't know. I think if you're working in an office and you cannot, like after work, let's read for 2 hours the articles on Politico, which is this. It's a politics newspaper that everybody reads in the European bubble, but outside of the bubble, nobody knows that it exists. And it has top-notch journalists. And if you read it for 2 hours every day, you find out why the European Union is amazing. If you don't have that time, you can check DG Meme, which is a concentrated version of what I read on Politico, basically. And then you can find out why the European Union is interesting.
And would you say European politicians in member states or in the EU institutions can make fun of themselves?
Well, now, fun. Some of them probably, but
Who, for example?
Who is Vestager? This lady here. Yes, she has a lot of sense of humor, and she also likes to post gifs of herself or memes. I mean, they understood that that's how you create relatability on social media.
And would you say Brussels is kind of bubble and people are stuck inside?
Yeah, I guess, yes. If you check the presentation, I think that was all the main theme was, yes, how you can burst this bubble. Yeah.
Do you work with different sense of humor in different countries? Like, when you do memes for Czechs or Italian or French or German, do you work with different mentality in the States?
That's a very good question. Actually, yes, in my experience, different countries have really different sense of humor. Like your Czech humor is very sassy, very dark. I like it a lot. There is always sarcastic replies. And maybe some other countries, like I don't know, Spain is a different kind of humor, maybe a bit simpler with less sarcasm. So yes, it's very rare that I make a meme just targeted to a specific state, because my intent is to break what is funny in that member state to the other states. So that's always what I'm trying to achieve, or spread the inner jokes that are among different states. For example, in Estonia, if you know where it is, they say that Latvians have 6 toes on their feet. Yes, that's a very funny thing to say, and it's fun when you are on Erasmus and you find out about these jokes. It's like the jokes between, I don't know, Bohemians and Moravians, right? And they are funny for you, and it would be nice to make them funny also for the rest of the European Union, to have a European memes agenda somehow.
And as you spoke about, these bubbles, do you consider how communicate with people who are not interested in EU politics or in, politics? Do you consider how communicate with these people who are not interested in that?
Yeah, of course, if there is zero interest at all, like the bird we saw before, I don't think there is much you can do. I mean, you lost it. You can try to explain why you should be interested, but, well, there are limits there.
And do you try to do this?
Yes, I think I do. I don't think I succeeded yet. Like reaching a right-wing Eurosceptic electorate would be nice in a way, because we can reason together, hopefully. But sometimes you cannot reason with everybody, right?
Do you think that you could create a meme that would bring the UK back into the EU?
Yeah, I wish. I wish I could have done one that didn't let you leave, unfortunately, but.
My regret too.
Yeah, I would like to ask, do you have any data about how successful your attempts are? Or how many people are following you, or how much impact does your attempts have?
Yes, well, the total number of followers is around 100,000. Mostly Twitter is the strongest with 62,000, I think. Now, I asked myself the question, like, do I really manage to reach Eurosceptic people? I think I reach probably, 5 to 10%, depending on how they are friends with more pro-European people. In the embassies, it's well known. In universities, EU laws, it's known. So that's part of people that are already pro-EU. But judging by the number of trolls that is always increasing, I think I also start annoying Russians and right-wing, extreme right activists. Yeah.
How many people believe that it's real DG in the European institutions?
More than I was hoping for, I swear.
Actually, I Google it at first as well, if it's fictional or not.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
good. Yes, you see, well, it means the idea works. So sometimes angry people reply like if it were a commission account. So I get all the crazy Catalan independentist shitstorm. It's also happening there. Yep.
And what's the reaction from European Commission? Do they hate you that you are using their, DG sign for your
Well,
for
now
your activity?
they tolerate me. Actually, I'm doing their job, so they should also be thankful, I think.
And they should pay you,
especially-
maybe?
Sorry?
They should pay you.
Yeah,
for
that would be nice, but well, you can't have everything. But yeah, definitely at the beginning, for the first 2 years, I was hiding because sense of humor is fine, but yeah, when you're working inside, yeah, it's dangerous. But yeah, then this Politico Europe, which is this newspaper everybody's reading, asked me for an interview, and they published it on page 3. So on that morning, everybody in the European Union knew about this satirical page, and that's when, I mean, it was probably too big to shut it down. But I know that there were discussions about finding out who this person is. So yes, at the beginning it was colder, but now we are big friends, I would say.
Good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Have you ever had any feedback from someone you put in the meme or not?
Like, you mean from people?
Yes,
that are in
if
the-
someone
Like-
from the picture,
yeah. From
Get
Czech
you any
Prime Minister, for
feedback?
example,
no. So not from
like
institutions.
Ursula or anyone else.
No, well, sometimes Vestager commented on some memes I did about her, which were positive, of course.
And do they share it sometimes? Politicians, your memes?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, President of the European Parliament shared the meme with her and Obama. So, yes, yeah.
So you must be happy when you saw that.
Yes,
Because,
of course. It's nice. It means that they recognize your work and they understand that you can change the European communication.
Do you remember your very first meme you posted?
Oh, yes. I usually show it in presentation, but this time I changed completely the order. So it was inspired by the director in my unit. You have these meetings and the director talks and say, we have Eurobarometer, which makes statistics about the EU. According to them, 70% of people love the EU and 60% recognize the brand. And I was like, why? That doesn't match my personal experience. And then I used the meme template there is the dog and child that talk, and they ask each other, like, did you hear that 2 out of 3 Europeans like the European Union? And the child says, I like the European Union. The dog says, I like it too. And then they look towards you at the screen and like, then it must be you who is faulty.
There are a lot of people who think that Brexit is the result of people in the UK not really knowing what benefits the EU brings and has brought to them. If you could go back in time, say 40 or 50 years, and you would be in charge of EU communications in the UK to ensure that they would make a better decision about whether to stay in the EU or not, what would you have done?
I would have kidnapped Boris Johnson in the 90s and locked him somewhere for 10 years, and we would have avoided all the shift that in 10 years destroyed the European sentiment in the UK. That's probably not a good answer. It's not politically correct. So I would have definitely not listened to David Cameron when he said to Juncker, don't even try to mingle with our communication. I will win this referendum by myself. Arrogance, very stupid. And yes, so they should have tried to communicate, because, hey, if your girlfriend wants to leave you, it's not like you say, yeah, whatever, I will not enter because it's a member state business if she wants to leave me. You try to persuade her, it's nice to stay with me. And that's the same that the European Union should have done. And that's Juncker admitted that this was his biggest regret, that he didn't try to communicate. And yes, this argument, sorry, it makes me very angry. So I'll tell you the anecdotes. One day, Margaritis Kinas, who is now the Greek commissioner for immigration, came to a unit meeting where I was also present. He was back then the spokesperson manager, so the one that decides the EU communication, the institutional communication. And I asked him exactly this question, like, why didn't you communicate? Are we going to communicate for the European elections of 2019? And he was like, no, because this is something that we shouldn't show off too much. We shouldn't annoy member states. That's the main reasoning. And I told him, yeah, but that's the same mistake you did with Brexit. And his reply was like, if we had communicated during Brexit, we would have lost 40 to 60. And I told him, it's because you don't know how to communicate, because this is not an answer of somebody who is the head of communication, right? And this approach remained because, of course, the European institution is fragile, and you are there, and you have to listen to different sensitivities, and you have to respect member states. You cannot just go bluntly and say, this is stupid, you cannot do this. But if you don't show passion, then what happens is you have misunderstanding with European values and reasons, and then Brexit happens, and then you have Catalan independentism happening. You have all these problems cooking up, and better communication could probably, I'm not saying it would solve these problems, but at least it would, create a protection around them.
Good, thank you. Eurobarometer data. I Google it, and according to Eurobarometer, Czech Republic's trust in the EU is one from the lowest from all of member states. And data from 2021 shows that the confidence to the EU is only 48% in the Czech Republic. And it's good because it used to be much lower few years ago. And for example, in Portugal, it is 78% of confidence. Why is this difference in your eyes? Or why in the Czech Republic is such a low trust to the EU or in the EU?
Well, you should be an expert in your national politics, which I'm not, but Portugal had more pro-European leaders that are also, receiving the money and thanking for the money, which is an important thing to do. Somebody else receives the money and stores it in their own private company and then tries to build anti-European sentiments. These are things that happen. So, of course, the national leaders you have will have a strong impact in deciding if then people will trust in the European project, will have trust in the European project or not.
How should I describe benefits of EU membership to my uncle who is living in the small village in South Moravia, who is not interested in, European politics, who doesn't follow you and DG memes? How should I communicate with him? What I should say him in 3 or 4 sentences, simple sentences, simple messages, why EU membership is beneficial for us?
Well, you first could translate my memes to Czech. You're very welcome to do
I'll
that.
try.
In case that, there it depends. You should evaluate your uncle and see if he's willing to listen to, you can have multiple ways. You can offer him some schnapps and then, sing the European anthems. And maybe that's the way that works with him. I mean, depends on
I tried. It didn't work. It didn't work.
Depends on the uncle. If, some people, they just need to have somebody to hate or somebody to blame. And that's the European Union is the perfect culprit for anything, right? You can always blame it on the European Union because they are not powerful. They don't have a strong communication team. They don't have spin doctors. So it's great to have it. It gives you money and you can blame it for everything that goes wrong. Who wouldn't want that? But that's a problem. I hope that now the people that listen this evening, maybe somebody is persuaded to talk to the many uncles that we all have and open the debate. And also remember them. How was it 30 years ago? Maybe you see that there is some positive shift despite of everything, looming war and economic crisis. But, together we are stronger. There is no doubt about that.
We're pretty often very sad about the English of our political representatives, including the ones who are going to EU. And here a couple of comedians are making good memes to probably sometimes to push them to work on their English. However, do you believe that also in other European countries, some of the political representatives have really bad English and they are not able to participate on certain, behind the scenes discussions? And are we that bad within European context, our Czech political representatives in EU?
Of course not. There are a lot of politicians that very bad English. Yes, so do not worry, my friend. No. But sorry, I must say, not even the commissioners. Like if you listen to them talking in English, I mean, of course, Ursula von der Leyen speaks 4 languages like her mother tongue. But the others, I mean, it takes time, and more than time, it takes the will. Because like now you're here listening to me speaking in English, and I'm not speaking my language. I'm speaking English because we want to communicate and understand each other, and that's the first step that is important. If you don't have this step, then you will never learn a language. And yes, then it means you don't have what I call the European spirits, because you understand that language is culture. And if you don't have the same language, it's not the same as having interpretation. So Umberto Eco, an Italian thinker and philosopher, said that the language of European Union is the translation. Maybe he's right. My hope is that in the future we will all be confident in one language, which is European English, which is a completely different language than English, right? But still, it makes us understand each other, and we can communicate the concepts, which is all that communication is about. Then grammars and prepositions, this is a detail. So again, don't worry, there is worse. At least those that make mistakes in English, they try to speak in English.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our time is almost over. Before we'll quit, I have a request. Can we take a picture together with the audience?
Of course, with pleasure.
And you can make a meme from that.
Okay.
Do you mind?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thank you very much, Fabio.
Thank you, people.
It was a pleasure to meeting
My
you.
pleasure
Thanks for
meeting.
joining us. And thank all of you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the festival. Enjoy Melting Pot and enjoy Colors of Ostrava. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.